these two particular polysaccharides from aloe vera and rice bran. If you guys are not familiar with the power of really, I mean, it's just there. I like to refer to them as pleiotropic nutrients, although maybe that's not really the greatest term in the world. But I spent about 20 years at the University of Miami Medical School here in Miami, Florida, running these clinical trials. I have close to 190 papers in my career, scientific articles. I've lectured all around the world, but you know, all those academic credentials are nice, but really what makes me tick is helping people through nutrition, particularly with these particular polysaccharides that I just get such a thrill about talking to people about, because of the fact that usually most times people don't really know too much about them. So for me, it's always a nice opportunity. And I hope some of the folks listening tonight or watching tonight will not be, you know, for the first time hearing about this information, although I suspect some of the research that I'm going to present to you tonight will probably be new, just because I haven't had the opportunity to really, you know, broadcast this as widely and as loudly as I would like. But that's part of what I've been working on in my business. But anyway, my company's name is Dr. Lewis Nutrition, and I'm happy that my contact information is here. I still have a voluntary faculty appointment at the University of Miami. Again, I'm not in academics full time anymore, but my and my personal email addresses are here. My phone number, if anyone would like a copy of this presentation, I'm more than happy to email it to you. There's nothing here that I consider to be proprietary. So with that said, let's jump right into it. I like to always acknowledge anytime I lecture two particular people who really completely changed not only my profession, but my life in terms of introducing me to the power of these polysaccharides. Dr. Reg McDaniel on the aloe vera side, Miss Barbara Kimley on the rice bran side. Both of these people really opened my eyes to what polysaccharides could do that were just, again, so much more than I learned as a graduate student in biochemistry. I probably learned that polysaccharides were basically an energy source, and that was about it in terms of what I learned about them as a student. So I'm really indebted to those two people for the rest of my life. And of course, all the sponsors and the people who participated in our research. Without those folks, never could have done any of this work. But let me start out at just a little bit of a higher level, which I think is important to do, is to give nutrition its proper context and place certainly within my work, and I'm sure within many of your work as well. Every time I lecture, I always like to, you know, start out with a couple of just anecdotes from the past. And of course, we all know this phrase, let food be thy medicine, from Hippocrates. I think, you know, whatever this guy's brain, you know, whatever his IQ, his capacity to just really understand and comprehend prior to any, you know, known scientific method or technology or anything else. I just find what he said at that time, 2,500 years before our calendar even started, is just really profound. And of course, everybody knows Hippocrates is the father of modern medicine. However, going many, many years into the future, Dr. James Lind, who was one of the significant people within the British Navy in the 1700s, as you can see, when he was alive, probably most people don't know who James Lind is. Usually when I lecture and I ask if you heard of James Lind or you knew what his significance was, and most people don't. But if you think about what he discovered, this knowledge that you could utilize citrus, lemons, fruits, and oranges to not only treat scurvy, but to actually, not only to prevent it, but to actually reverse it in people who have it. So Dr. Lind's discovery was really significant in allowing the British to dominate basically the entire world for many, many years. And that secret stayed with the British for a long time. Excuse me. But in my opinion, you know, when you look at, of course, Hippocrates first, and then somebody like James Lind, what the point is of you know, mentioning these two individuals is that nutrition, the power of nutrition, or you know, the idea that nutrition is really the underlying factor to health is not a new concept. You know, it's been around for a very long time, and it's just been a matter of, you know, how it kind of fits into the context of society at any given time. But when I think about, you know, the use of citrus to treat and prevent scurvy. It's like, according to the FDA's definition of anything that treats health, that's considered a drug. But nobody in his or her right mind would think an orange or a lemon or a lime is a drug. So, that's just kind of a preposterous aspect of the environment that we live in today as people that help other people with nutrition and what we can and cannot say based on FDA and FTC and all these government regulations. But to me, it's very important to remember these things, and especially in the context of how they're applied and how they're discussed. And so we know today, I mean, we clearly have a very serious problem related to how the typical American eats today. I mean, if you just look at the so-called SAD, the standard American diet, all this processed food, heavily processed food, ultra processed food, too much fatty food, too much animal food, too much sweet food, then not eating enough fruits and vegetables, fresh fruits and vegetables. All these things are just really killing us. And it's no wonder that we have all of these epidemics of these diseases and disorders. I mean, just, take your pick of any that you like here, all of these things that, whether it's the Institute of Medicine or, certain other factions will say typically that 80% of these could be prevented if we ate better and we moved. I mean, that's really a lot of what it comes down to today. Of course, you still have factors like tobacco use, alcohol use, insomnia, stress management. I mean, there are certainly other environmental and lifestyle factors at play here. But when you really think about all the literature that's available and all the information that's available about nutrition and the benefit of nutrition, and of course, I know that, when you talk about diet, of course, that's obviously a very controversial topic because people have their biases, whether you're, vegan or carnivore or keto or Mediterranean or whatever that is. Of course, people will argue and debate what the optimal diet is, but nonetheless, in the grand scheme of all the scientific literature, when you look at just changing a few things and moving toward a more natural diet, you could just do so much to help all these folks that are just crippled today with these various chronic diseases. And I like to talk about obesity as kind of, this canary in the coal mine, if you will, of what's happened to us since the early 1960s. We had right before that the introduction of fast food by McDonald's. And then around that time, we had the industrial green revolution, where all these synthetic chemicals, pesticides, herbicides were introduced to what's now a very corporate form of agriculture. And then other factors too, related to technology, of course, as people started getting more sedentary. So, it's not just one thing, but when you look at BMI as an indicator of obesity, and granted, it's not a perfect indicator, but it's pretty accurate compared to percentage body fat. I mean, just look at what's happened to us since the early 1960s up until just a few years ago, when the CDC released these latest batch of NHANES data. I mean, it's just staggering. And, I don't know, I'm sure you guys also, you probably educate a lot of your patients and clients about genetics, like people, I just spoke to a lady a couple of days ago, and she's telling me that her children's problems are all due to genetics, completely ignoring the fact that they're not eating well and other factors. But to me, in my opinion, I mean, and this isn't a shot at epigenetics. I mean, I understand how epigenetics works, but otherwise, if you look at what happened to us from the 1960s to today and where we are with obesity, I mean, these numbers are just staggering. And now men are more obese than women for the first time. So you're talking over 42 or so % of the population is obese, according to a BMI greater than 30. And then you have another 30 some odd % that are overweight. So they're between 25.0 and up to 29.9. So you're talking 7 out of 10 Americans are obese today, or I'm sorry, overweight or obese. Staggering numbers that have changed in my lifetime, just in the last, 50, 60 years. So to me, this is a very strong indicator of lifestyle and environment and behavior, and having nothing to do with genes. I mean, I just don't agree with the idea that in the last 50, 60 years, our genes said, okay, now it's time for humans to be obese and sick. That doesn't make any sense to me. And that's not how our genes work. So, these are some of the contextual factors that are very important to me in my work and how I look at things. But, moving, from that very high level helicopter view down to a little bit further into this, talking about dietary supplements. Of course, many times people are skeptical of dietary supplements because of, so many different findings and so many different conclusions, and it depends on the funding and the design of the trial and all these other factors. So I understand that. But again, when you look at what dietary supplements can do, and if you're someone who maybe doesn't think dietary supplements are all that useful or all that practical, I can tell you that your patients are still using them, and I'll get to that data in just a moment. But when you think of roughly 80,000 products on the market today, according to the Institute of Medicine, I mean, it's a huge industry. It continues growing. If you look at from what happened in 1994 when the DSHEA Act was passed, up until these last couple of years, the industry just continues growing. It doesn't matter if it was a dot-com bubble burst in the late 90s, all the way to the real estate bubble burst in 08 and 09. Even with those kinds of things happening, and then of course lockdowns over the last couple of years, the dietary supplement industry continued growing. So what does that tell you? That tells you, in my opinion, that people are looking for answers. They're going to their physician, or staying in this conventional approach to treatment or to address a health challenge, and they're not getting answers. So the dietary supplement industry is an area that's ripe for providing answers to people and can help people if applied properly. So here was what I was getting at just a moment ago. If you look at the typical dietary supplement user, again, these are data from NHANES. If you can believe, if NHANES, if CDC still has credibility at this point, but that's another conversation. But still, if you look at the dietary supplement use data, according to NHANES, a lot of Americans are using dietary supplements. So you're talking just under 60% of Americans age at least 20 or over are using a dietary supplement or have used at least one in the last 30 days. I mean, that's over half of our population. So that's 330 million. That's over 160 some odd million people using a dietary supplement every day who's at least 20 years of age. And then of course, the typical dietary supplement user, and this has been for a while, I've been tracking these data for the last 10, 15 years. It's usually an older, non-Hispanic white female who is physically active and has a higher level of education. So you're typically talking about the mom or, the grandmom in the household who's making decisions about using dietary supplements, not only for herself and probably her husband or, other family members. And so that's the person, these are the people that are using dietary supplements, and it's a huge number of people in our country today. So it can't be ignored. And I don't see our industry going away anytime soon. So with that said, let me again get into some of the details of the work that we've done over the last, gosh, it's hard to believe it's been, I think this all started in about 08 or 09. So it's going on quite a while now, roughly 15 years that we've been at this. And again, even though I'm still not, I'm not in academics anymore full time, I'm actually still publishing data from these data sets. I've got a new paper from the Alzheimer's study I'm getting ready to mention that we just submitted for publication this past week. So there's a lot of information that came out of this study initially and is still coming out that's, in my opinion, very valuable and can be very beneficial to people. So one of the fascinating things for me is talking about polysaccharides and, looking at this word, or hearing this term polysaccharide. And I could have just as easily said, well, folks, I think sugar is good for you. And probably because of just the way the mass media portrays the word sugar or anything that comes from sugar, and it all just gets lumped in together. Like it's all, considered bad or evil, or no, you can't eat sugar. And it just really, it bothers me when I hear people say that, because there are so many sugars that occur in nature, and of course, sugars that get modified in chemistry labs, but these sugars that come from things like rice bran and aloe vera and even Dioscorea, wild yam, man, these are very, very good sugars for us. And so they're polysaccharides. And so a sugar is not a sugar. It depends on the sugar. Yes, if you're talking about high fructose corn syrup or eating too much sucrose or glucose or even fructose in your diet, okay, sure, that's probably not your best strategy. But you cannot use the word sugar and say all sugar is bad for you. That is categorically not true, and I'm going to show you why. So the first part of this review will be related to the allopolysaccharide complex. And this is a product that we call now Daily Brain Care. And again, I'm still referring to these studies that have been going on since really prior to 2009, simply because, we had time writing the protocol and getting IRB approval and all these other things. So it was really when data collection, or I should say not data collection, but enrolling our subjects occurred in 2009, and then we went from there. But we'll talk about these two studies first, and people with moderate to severe Alzheimer's disease, and then people with relapsed remitting multiple sclerosis. So again, two of the big three in terms of neurodegeneration and what we've showed in our lab to be able to help counteract or help people with these really tragic issues. And so before we get into really more of the guts of each of these trials, it's important to consider, well, why are these polysaccharides so effective, and why do they help people not just for neurodegeneration, but many other things as well? So this is really just a graphical representation of every cell in our body that we are now comfortable in saying that every 30 plus trillion cells in our body utilizes these polysaccharides. And the reason why they're so important is because of what's happening between the endoplasmic reticulum here and the Golgi over here, is that anytime some bioactive compound is created or cells are communicating with each other, they need these polysaccharides right here. It's not very readable, but you could see it if you request the presentation from me. But it is known, again, and this is going back into the 80s at least. I mean, people around the world looking at the field of glycobiology or glycomics, whatever you prefer, looking at why these sugars are so crucial to cellular functioning, essentially. And so they're very much needed. Now, they're not essential, so the body can reconstruct these sugars from other sugars that are more commonly found in the diet, like those that I've mentioned. But what seems to be true is that there is a special quality to these particular polysaccharides coming from aloe vera and rice bran primarily, and other plants as well, that when you give them directly in the diet, as opposed to relying on the body to reconstruct glucose and sucrose and fructose into these polysaccharides, you have a much more effective response. And so one of the questions that we continually ask ourselves, as in our group of our band of little scientists, is, do these polysaccharides function as a signaling mechanism for the immune system, as just one particular aspect of their function? And we think this is a resounding yes at this point, based on all of the work that we've done and what we've published so far. So we really feel like this is a 100% yes answer to this question. And of course, there are many other factors or many other mechanisms that are at play here, but overall immunomodulation, which is what I'm really going to get into much more as I talk about our trials, to us is really the most significant factor here, just simply due to the way that the immune system is as you guys know, is involved in so much crosstalk with all the other major organ systems. And so the immune system is so crucial in it's crucial in sort of orchestrating the balance between all other major organ systems. And so ultimately immunomodulation is just like one of those key factors or key functions going on that is driven, at least in part, by how these polysaccharides are observed by the body or recognized by the body, and then ultimately downstream leading to better immune function. When I first got into this many, many years ago, and this is a patient of Dr. McDaniel, excuse me, you can see from the images here, I mean, this was before we even started our first trial in Alzheimer's and MS, is he was showing me a lot of the stuff that he had been doing, actually, again, was not in neurodegeneration, but it was actually in a lot of cancers. And so he showed me here a patient who had metastatic disease from the pancreas, had surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, the whole 9 yards of conventional treatment, still went to cancer hospice, basically from that point, from the conventional perspective, given up for dead. If you're going to a hospice, that's probably the last step before the funeral home, unfortunately. So Dr. McDaniel spoke to this man, agreed to start taking the saccharides, and then sure enough, within a year, you can see the 1 year change in the tumor size. And then eventually he ended up leaving hospice cancer-free. So this was the kind of thing, it was one of my early learning experiences about how these polysaccharides work and what they really do in terms of, again, not treating disease. I mean, we never talk about the polysaccharides in the context of treating disease. That's the pharmacological model or paradigm. We're talking about providing the raw materials to the cells to allow them to function properly, to allow the cells all the way up to the entire body to heal itself, to repair, restore, and heal itself, returning it to homeostasis. And that's really what this is all about. Much like anything else that we would do in nutrition, but due to the effectiveness of these polysaccharides, time and time again, I haven't seen anything else like it, folks. Nothing else in my view of nutrition quite really compares to the effectiveness of these polysaccharides. But if any of you have had either a direct family member or a close friend or someone else that you've been aware of, or maybe you're treating patients with Alzheimer's and dementia, you know how devastating and horrible this disease is. I mean, it's really just incredible how many people. I think we're now up to about 6 million Americans with Alzheimer's, and then another 8 with different types of dementias. Of course, you can see the estimated numbers for what's going on globally. And then the not only the disease itself, I mean, in terms of, no consensus about what causes it, certainly no consensus about how to treat it. It's now, I think, the 6th leading killer of Americans. It's the #1 killer of the British. And then look at the numbers for what it's costing. I mean, the formal and informal costs are just staggering. I mean, we're talking about, roughly $500 billion per year. So not only is it devastating to the person who gets the disease, and then of course the caregiver gets completely worn out and sick because of how tragically difficult the caregiving for someone with Alzheimer's and dementia is, but then the cost, the financial implications of this disease are also just terrible. So we were fortunate. We got a gift from a family that had lost 4 family members to Alzheimer's disease. And they heard Dr. McDaniel talking about some of his anecdotal responses in Alzheimer's and dementia and Parkinson's. And so the wife of this family approached him about donating some money to do research. And her real only stipulation was to make sure that it was conducted in people with Alzheimer's disease. So we ran this study at the University of Miami in conjunction with a local center that has a lot of Alzheimer's patients. We gave them, we called it generically allopolymannose multinutrient complex, because it's not just the aloe vera and the rice bran, but it's got several other things in it as well. Again, when you think of nutrition being more like analogous to a shotgun, where you're wanting to spread out a lot of different nutrients, phytonutrients, molecules, elements, cofactors, metabolites, compared to the pharmacological model, where it's one chemical for one mechanism of action for one symptom of a disease. Completely different models here. So we decided to enroll moderate to severe severity of disease. We wanted to really help the very sick people. We looked at cognitive function every quarter. We looked at cognitive function 5 times. Unfortunately, our budget was limited, so we only had enough money to draw blood at baseline in 12 months. We had them take 2.5 grams 4 times per day. And then we had just a very large battery of biomarkers that I'll just mention some of the most significant ones given the shortness of time. And by the way, I'm also happy to share. So we published so far 3 papers from the Alzheimer's study. And as I mentioned, we just submitted a 4th one this past week. And then we published 2 papers from the MS study, and we're going to publish a 3rd one it'll be like a sister paper that don't really have much time to get into. But anyway, if anyone's interested in any of the papers that I'm discussing as well, I'm happy, in addition to sending you the presentation, I can send you all of our papers as well. So no problem there. So with cognitive function, particularly in people with dementia, the ADAS-Cog, or the ADAS, is widely considered to be the gold standard for assessing cognition in people with dementia. And if you're not familiar with this particular, with this particular assessment, it goes down. Going down is a good thing. So at 70, you're basically a vegetable, and at 0, you have perfect cognition. And you can see over the 12-month period, it did go up a little bit at 3 months. It worsened by about 1.5 points at 3 months, but then it continued improving at 6. And then at 9 and 12 months, we had clinically and statistically significant improvements in cognitive function. Now, for us, this was, I mean, beyond anything we expected. We were optimistic and hopeful that the study would be positive, but the fact that we could show clinically and statistically significant improvement in cognitive function for us was just truly remarkable, and it really validated and was consistent with many of the anecdotal reports that I got from caregivers and even staff members calling me as we were conducting the study about, you know, how subject 2 or 3 or whatever was, you know, talking and doing things that he or she hadn't done in some cases for many years. So that was just a beautiful finding. That this first paper was published 10 years ago. I still haven't even seen anything that compares to this. I hope that doesn't sound too arrogant or egotistical, but just really nothing else like this in the literature. So that's on the clinical side. Then on the physiological and biochemical side, again, these are just the most significant findings, but looking at the improvement in the CD4 to CD8 ratio, that was a very nice finding of global or overall immune function. TNF alpha and VEGF, those are, you know, classically looked at in cardiovascular disease and cancer. Our paper was probably the first paper to publish this kind of information in Alzheimer's, at least to our knowledge, and we're showing a lowering of inflammation. And then the CD14 cells, a marker of adult stem cells, they improved by just under 300% from baseline to 12 months. So when you put all of that together, you've got improving in immune function, lowering of inflammation, increasing adult stem cell production, and then improving cognition. I mean, the only thing that makes sense to us was, without having money or a budget to do imaging in the study, was that these adult stem cells were migrating out to the brain to basically engage in neuroplasticity, which, you know, 20 years ago, I'd have been laughed out of the room for making such a statement. But now neuroplasticity, certainly in some parts of the brain, is considered to be true. And we know that the brain has capacity to regenerate itself. So to us, this was the only thing that made sense to be able to explain why why we got the data that we collected in cognition. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense why people started remembering things and having their cognition come back. So that first paper was really remarkable. We published 2 additional papers after that, and over the next few years, we really focused on these next 2 papers on brain-derived neurotropic factor. Although when you looked at the change in BDNF, it wasn't statistically significant. It did go up a little bit, I think 11, 12%. But we looked at some of the relationships with BDNF and both the cognitive function measures and then the immune function measures. And we had discovered, you know, as we were publishing our first paper and then continuing to read more literature, that there were other papers publishing about BDNF's importance in, you know, certainly memory and neuroplasticity and all these different functions within the brain. And so we felt like it was worth it to look at BDNF in our population and see if we could show anything similar. Again, unfortunately, the change in BDNF didn't really do that much. It went up by, here I'm saying, by 11% over the 12-month period. The pro-BDNF actually went down just a little bit. It really was, again, insignificant. But then one of the things that we had done in a previous study in HIV was we looked at cognitive function in a big sample of people with HIV, and we discovered that with people who had HIV, if we split their data between those that were higher than 5,000 picograms and those who were under 5,000, there was a distinct demarcation in cognitive function in these folks with HIV. So we decided to do the same thing in this study in people with Alzheimer's. And sure enough, if you look at all of these different immune function markers, there is clearly a difference here. And so the more BDNF you have, the more it's related typically to better cognitive function across all these different measures that we looked at. So that was very interesting. And then in the second paper, the second of the 2 BDNF papers, the third paper overall, same thing again, we showed that all these different immune function markers were different in folks that had more than 5,000 picograms of BDNF. So those were 2, kind of secondary papers. We were a bit more optimistic or hopeful that BDNF would be able to help explain more from a mechanistic perspective why the polysaccharides were so beneficial to these folks with moderate to severe Alzheimer's, but it kind of left us, still guessing a little bit. Again, not really knowing exactly for sure what BDNF's role is, but it seems to be at least a little bit indicated that, it has some value there. But again, a lot of these responses and effects that we showed mostly for the first time 10 years ago and up until today, and still the stuff that we just submitted recently is also very exciting because I believe we have more results that we were publishing for the first time in people with Alzheimer's. So we were just really excited. And again, it's one thing to conduct good science and feel like you've done a good job, but when you can help people and actually improve people's lives, to me, that's really, ultimately what the goal is here. So we were just very excited and encouraged by all these results. And then in the MS study, it was a very similar design. It was putting the people on the dietary supplement for a 12-month period. These were people who had had MS for an average of 12 years. By the way, I didn't mention it, but the average age of the people in the Alzheimer's study were 79.9 years of age. So these were very old, very sick people. The people with MS were quite a bit younger, but they had still had MS for quite a while. And then we published 2 articles from this study so far, as I mentioned. Now, the first paper, we looked at infections and immune function and inflammation. One of the things that I learned as I was conducting this study was that the #1 killer of people with MS is actually some type of infection. So if you look here at baseline, the average person has just under 8 infections, and then at 12 months, down to 2.5. So we were really impressed and encouraged by this, the fact that you could not only help save these folks' lives, but also keep them out of the hospital, because MS is obviously, much like Alzheimer's disease, a very expensive and costly disease to take care of people. And so to be able to cut down on the number of infections over that 12-month intervention was really impressive for us. And then, as you would expect, some of these inflammatory and immune function markers were certainly not the same as Alzheimer's, but again, showing an overall improvement in immune function. And I go into quite a bit of explanation about how some of these, like IL-2, IL-1 beta, EGF, how they all interact with each other. And we do a nice job of explaining how these changes appear to be, so significant for folks with MS, and being able to really kind of counteract this notion of autoimmunity, which I think maybe gets thrown around a little bit too much. But the FAS, the CD95, CD34, I mean, that was a very nice increase at the 12-month period, showing an overall improvement in immune function. So all that information was really encouraging to us. And then, much like the ADAS is the gold standard for assessing cognition in dementia studies, the FAMS is pretty much the gold standard for assessing functional assessment in people with MS. So looking at all these scales of the FAMS, you can see that for the most part over this 12-month period, and in this case, increasing scores are better. So all of these were, except for the family social well-being and the emotional well-being, it was, you could say, mildly significant. All of these were very significant. So again, showing all kinds of improvements in mobility, symptoms, general contentment, thinking and fatigue, and then the total score. So very nice findings here in terms of functional assessment. And then these two EQs, they're overall markers of quality of life. BDI is the Beck Depression Inventory. And then the HCDS, that was a homemade scale that we used at the clinic, just kind of a very large and broad symptom scale. Again, all of these wildly statistically significant. And we had a lot of nice anecdotal responses from the subjects as well, being able to, share with us some of the things that were happening in their lives in terms of being more functional, being less depressed, having a better mood, being able to care for themselves a lot better. So again, just very, very nice findings from this study as well. So in conclusion, as I mentioned, where we're talking about immunomodulation as kind of being the key to all this, really when you think about immunomodulation and how it impacts all the other major organ systems, and then ultimately leading to the clinical side, where it's either improving cognitive function in people with Alzheimer's or improving functionality and quality of life in people with MS. I mean, we're just talking about really, really nice effects and nice findings that we published from our studies. And then, just in general, I mean, when you think of what we do with nutrition, generally you have no known adverse effects, nothing interacting with medications, certainly nothing with other nutrition or other nutrients. No hypo-responsiveness. In other words, you basically want to take these polysaccharides for life. I mean, you don't have to have a health challenge to be able to benefit from these things. I mean, I've been on this formula myself for over 10 years. And I don't ever hope to have Alzheimer's or MS or anything of the sort, but helping my immune system stay modulated and surveillant and keeping my inflammation low is a big part of this. So again, I'm pretty easily convinced at this point that these allopolysaccharides are definitely signaling mechanisms for the immune system and certainly capable of immunomodulation. And then shifting gears here to the rice bran side of things. So we ran 3 clinical trials here. You can see the first one in healthy adults, and then the second and the third one simultaneously were run with people with HIV and people with NAFLD. So what's interesting about this particular rice bran is that it's been hydrolyzed by shiitake mushroom enzyme. So because these polysaccharides are so complex and so difficult to completely graphically characterize, this by no means is complete or 100% accurate. But what we think is going on here in the hydrolyzation process or the hydrolysis process is that the molecular weight is lowered. And so much like the allopolysaccharide, the rice bran polysaccharide also becomes a signaling mechanism for the immune system. So this company that I work with in Japan that makes this hydrolyzed rice bran, they had conducted a lot of research in different parts of Asia, particularly in Japan, and they were looking to expand their footprint here in the United States. And when I met them through Barbara Kimley, the other person that I acknowledged in the first of my talk, when you look at what they were trying to accomplish, they really wanted to see, okay, well, we've published some stuff in Japan and the Philippines and Korea, but we want to have a bigger footprint here in the United States. And that was, again, just, me being in the right place at the right time to develop this relationship with these folks. But we started out really, we were wanting to do kind of like a safety study, not so much efficacy, but really just to be able to publish a first paper to say, well, it doesn't really have any adverse impact on the liver and the kidneys. And we're also going to look at cytokines and growth factors. And then, oh, by the way, we're also going to look at natural killer cell cytotoxicity. So we had actually split the study into 2 groups, 1 gram per day versus 3 grams per day. And of course, these were based on work that they had already previously done. And this was a very short-term study, baseline 48 hours, 7 days, 30 days, and 60 days. And we actually published 2 papers from this first study. The non-clinical paper that we published was more of a methodology paper that my colleague in the lab could tell you more about. But anyway, it was based on some new techniques in flow cytometry at that time. But anyway, it was interesting looking at these data because when we looked at this natural killer cell cytotoxicity data for the first time, and you see 1 gram per day in blue and 3 grams per day in red, there is no statistical difference in either group between these 2 curves. So in other words, basically 1 gram per day had no difference in effect compared to 3 grams per day. But what was fascinating to us was that if you see this value here at baseline, it goes up a little bit at 48 hours, and then it peaks at 1 week, and then it basically shuts off and goes back down, even actually a little bit below baseline at 30 and 60 days. So we thought about it for a minute, or probably more than a minute, at least a few days, if not a little longer. And we thought, wow, like this is amazing. Like this graph is like perfect, true immunomodulation in the short term, meaning that, remember, these were all healthy people, no diabetes, no cancer, no heart disease, no HIV, nothing of the sort. Otherwise healthy people. Put the rice bran into the diet, the natural killer cells turn on, the cytotoxicity goes up. At 1 week it peaks. It says, okay, there's no virus, there's no major transformed cell issue here, and it shuts the mechanism off. I mean, to us, this was like perfect, true immunomodulation. And the value here, remember, you can plump these 2 groups together. The value at 1 week was statistically higher than all other time points. So again, just like perfect, true immunomodulation over this 60-day period. The cytokines and growth factors were very similar to the ones that we looked at in all of our studies with Alzheimer's and MS as well. And Same thing here going on. You have this lowering of inflammation according to TNF alpha and IL-6. You have a nice uptake in MCP1, which is a cancer surveillance marker. And then again, VEGF going down as well over that 60-day period. So just really, really nice findings. All of the liver and kidney markers were also within normal limits. So a very beautiful study, a very elegant study showing this really nice immunomodulation profile. And then next, here's the data from the NAFLD study. So we had 1 gram per day for the treatment group. And then in this study, we did use a placebo and we looked at people over a 90-day period. So again, these rice bran studies are much more of shorter duration compared to the aloe vera studies, but baseline 45 and 90 days were our 3 time points here. So ALP, obviously one of the significant liver markers, showing a very nice decrease in the rice bran group. This is all the data that you're going to look at going forward will be, I think actually for all 3, the hydrolyzed rice bran is, no, I'm sorry, just for these 2, because the first one was not a placebo. But excuse me, I'm getting thinking of too many things at the same time here. The rice bran group is in blue and the placebo group is in red. So this will be true for all the graphs going forward from here. So again, you can see in ALP a nice statistically significant decrease over the 90-day period in the rice bran group. It continues to go up in the placebo group. So that was a very nice initial finding. The eosinophils, again, going up in the rice bran group, very nice finding here, and then going down in the placebo group. Monocytes, again, going up. Now, thinking about immunomodulation, again, this is a 90-day period. So again, you can kind of argue in a way that this is maybe a bit of immunostimulation, and I think we pointed this out in our discussion section in the paper. But again, because this is a 90-day period, this was the kind of response that we were hoping for, to be able to show that the rice bran is a signaling mechanism for all these things in the context of people with this very severe liver disorder. The placebo group did go up at 45 days as well, and then leveled off from 45 to 90 days, but the statistical significance was in the rice bran group. And then in the neutrophils, it's going down, which is good because this IL-17 marker, which is secreted, or I'm sorry, neutrophils secrete IL-17. This was a nice finding because this is actually showing that if you're at the NAFLD stage before you get to NASH or fibrosis or certainly liver cancer, you actually want to try to calm down this inflammation. So IL-17 being an inflammatory marker, it was nice showing that within the rice bran group, we're able to turn down the percentage of neutrophils and at the same time reduce the level of IL-17. So that was a very nice finding. And then probably the most clinically significant finding, even though it wasn't statistically significant, was that within the rice bran group, we actually got GGT, this gamma glutamyl transferase marker, down below 50, which is considered clinically significant. But then look at what was going on in the placebo group. It continued going up over that 90-day period. So this is a really, really nice finding here, because this essentially is telling us that you get the subject's or the patient's value below 50, and now you're shutting off this relationship of increasing the risk going from NAFLD to something far, far worse, typically ending up in cancer. So to be able to get that GGT value below 50 was just a really nice finding for us, even though, again, it was a little bit below statistical significance, but the clinical significant finding here was very valuable. And then again, IL-18 went down, even though it had this sort of weird uptick from 45 to 90 days, but overall it still went down. And that was consistent with a couple of previous animal studies looking at a model of liver disease in humans and these rats, and it was consistent with some of this previous research. So this was really nice as well, being able to shut down some of that inflammation. And then finally, the last study that I'll talk about here is the HIV study. So compared to the NAFLD study, where we only used 1 gram per day, we thought, given the severity of HIV and the toxicity associated with the antiretroviral medications and the interaction between the disease itself with the side effects of the medication, we felt like for this study, we wanted to give these subjects a higher dose So we put them on 3 grams per day of the rice bran, and this was over a 6-month period. So this was a bit longer than the 2 previous studies in rice bran. And so here's CD4, here are helper cells. So we're showing basically in both groups no change, 3% change in the rice bran group and about a 2% change in the placebo group. Now, even though that's not statistically different, you potentially could argue that BioBran actually is keeping the CD4, helping to keep the CD4s at this particular level. It's a pretty weak argument, in my opinion, because again, it's such a small change. But nonetheless, you know, it's something that you could at least consider. But where it really started to you know, where we really started to see the significance of what was going on here was actually in the CD8 cytotoxic cells. And so look at the difference here. So you have a little bit of a change, you know, about 5% change going on in the rice bran group, but you have this very big change going on in the placebo group. So what that ultimately, and that's statistically significant between the 2 groups, but what that ultimately meant was this change in the CD4 to CD8 ratio, which again fell just short of statistical significance, but clinically significant. This was so just, you know, exciting for us to be able to show this for the first time in a nutritional, to our knowledge. I mean, we can't find anything else, whether it's, you know, vitamin D or curcumin or anything else out there that actually showed something like this. So looking at the CD4 to CD8 ratio, and I had talked about this and its importance in the Alzheimer's study previously, but especially for people with HIV, if that value drops below 1.0, it's a very big problem. And a lot of times the physician will try to change the drug profile to get that ratio above 1.0, because once it drops below 1.0, that's where people become at greater risk for heart disease, diabetes, cancer, all these other metabolic things that people like HIV are getting, just like the rest of the population is. But if you look at what happened over the 6-month period, it did go down in both groups at 3 months, but then it goes up over 1.0 at the 6-month period for the BioBran group. And then it continues going down, in the placebo group. So again, this was just a beautiful finding to us. And the idea that we could use a nutritional to get that CD4 to CD8 ratio above 1.0 was just really, really exciting. And again, when you look at, you know, the whole host of effects here that's been demonstrated in our lab, and I mean, we're just one little group of bandits, so to speak. I mean, people are working on aloe vera and rice bran all over the world, but just in terms of what we've shown at the University of Miami, we feel like, you know, once again, hydrolyzed rice bran is certainly capable of true immunomodulation. And this, you know, this interesting finding of the natural killer cell cytotoxicity is quite a bit different than what we showed with the aloe vera, although it's probably similar. But, you know, much the same way, I mean, we're talking about no adverse effects, or certainly no known adverse effects, no interactive effects, no hypo-responsiveness. So again, something that's completely natural, and being able to, you know, help people with these very significant diseases and disorders is just something that's really powerful. And so when you think about just a couple of final conclusions here, I mean, in my mind, you know, it doesn't matter to me if you're plant-based vegan all the way to, you know, somebody who's carnivore or keto or Mediterranean. You're not getting these polysaccharides in your diet. I mean, you're certainly not getting them from aloe vera. You might be getting a little bit if you're eating brown rice every day, but if you're like most of the world who prefers to eat white rice, the rice bran has been stripped off the kernel. So white rice has none of these polysaccharides. And so to me, like when you look at the benefit of these polysaccharides compared to, you know, certainly benefit to risk ratio, I mean, you know, that's kind of a no-brainer to me. That's not even a comparison, because there really is no risk of taking aloe and rice bran polysaccharides. So the benefit that you gain from them, and again, I've really focused pretty specifically on immune function, immunomodulation, and inflammation. You know, those effects and those findings are very, very significant. But again, there are lots of other mechanisms of actions that are going on with these 2 classes of polysaccharides. So to me, they're they're very essential, and especially, not for just people with any kind of a health challenge, but, for people like me, and I'm sure many of you who want to prevent having serious health challenges in the first place. So prevention is so much a part of my life, and, the message that I preach, and also, the idea that there is no one magic bullet. I mean, it's obvious that you have to eat well. You cannot just supplement to good health, but eating a solid diet. Again, I know that's a controversial comment depending on your philosophy and what you think is the right thing to do. But taking your supplements and moving every day, exercising. I mean, they're just, there's a holistic, comprehensive approach to this that really kind of eliminates the magic bullet theory. But that's pretty much what I'll conclude with today. Again, here is my contact information, my email address, my phone number. If any of you would like to have a copy of this presentation, the articles we published, I'd be happy to share those with you. And I'm just very thankful for your time today, and thankful for Dr. Bourne, who introduced me to Dr. Clearfield, and allowing me the opportunity to speak to you guys. So I'm happy to answer any questions by email or phone call, however you'd like to communicate. I'd be more than happy to do that. So thank you again for your time. It's been my pleasure and honor to be here with you guys this evening.
Hi, John. It's Sheldon Shelstein.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Could you mention that testimonial you showed me the other day? Talk about that, just to give you, to give the people on the program, the Zoom program, an idea of how people have been responding to your product.
Are you talking about the Parkinson's patient?
Absolutely.
Okay. So again, remembering that we have not run a clinical trial in Parkinson's at this point, but certainly, when you look at it from a perspective of the relationship and neurodegeneration with, Alzheimer's and MS, it's obviously a very similar thing. And so I have a lady who's been on my product, Daily Brain Care, she just passed the 4-week mark, and she's 76. She's had Parkinson's for 15 years. Her most significant complaint has been very, very severe pain, neuropathy in her wrists and ankles. And within this 4-week period, she's had a major reduction in pain. She was not able, Shell, I didn't tell you this yet because I just learned this a couple of days ago. She also has RA in her hands pretty badly as well. A lot of swelling, particularly in her thumbs. And so she's had a marked reduction of the swelling in her thumbs. And then her son just sent me a picture a couple of nights ago showing that she could finally actually straighten out her hand for the first time, that she'd not been able to do for like 6 or 7 years. And so this is all happening again just within a few weeks of being on the polysaccharides, the Daily Brain Care. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm fortunate to hear about, literally, not necessarily daily, but certainly weekly, of people with all sorts of health challenges. They get on the polysaccharides and then their body just responds so well. She's clearly a super responder. I mean, usually I don't expect people to have such a great response within the first 30 days, but there are, in my experience, probably 20 to 30% of people who will have a pretty immediate response like she has. But I mean, she's been on every drug regimen you can imagine. Nothing's been able to help her pain, and nothing's been able to calm down her inflammation like Daily Brain Care has. So she and her children are just very happy and very pleased with her progress so far.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start reading some of the questions. The first question is from Melvin. Are these available in full script or whole script?
Man, people keep asking me that. I have not broken into their network yet. If anyone has a contact or can help me get into that realm, I'd love to do it. I actually met with one of their reps at A4M back in Hollywood in last year, and I talked to this lady. She was like, "Oh, this sounds great. I'd love to, introduce you to some people." And then, of course, I got crickets from her. So,
okay, I'll follow up with Doc. He's dealt, I believe, with both. So we'll contact
Great.
him. What do you think about polycostinol?
I'm not familiar with it. What is it?
Hey, Fred, do you want to come on board and talk about it? He might not be available. That's fine. Okay, Melvin's next question is, do you get the same effect if you take aloe or aloe supplement?
Absolutely not. You have to get the extract of the aloe gel, which can be other things besides the ace mannan or the acetylated polysaccharides. So you want, and I'm glad I should have said that in my talk, but I'm glad that was a question, because a lot of times people will ask me, well, can I just get the same effect by taking, aloe vera gel? No, absolutely not.
He always
Definitely
asks. He always asks the best questions. Is the rice bran product okay for your glute sensitive patients?
No question about it.
Okay. How do those who are on carnivore diet get their polysaccharides? That was
Well,
for
they
me.
could, okay. Well, they could, I mean, a 2.5 gram scoop of, daily brain care, a plant-based product. I mean, it shouldn't be too interruptive to a carnivore diet. So again, without patting my back too much, I would say, try daily brain care, because in my opinion, I've got the best product. Again, I hope that doesn't sound too arrogant. I apologize if it does. But I feel like I've got something here that's really a difference maker. And even for carnivore people, if you're okay with taking a few grams per day of some plant material, then it shouldn't be that disruptive to your diet.
Agree. Another question from Melvin. Are fruit/food sugars not good for cancer patients?
Well, again, I always kind of laugh when I get questions like this, because I'm talking about just a few grams per day. I mean, I've got people with, stage 3 and stage 4 cancer taking 10, 12 scoops a day. So you're talking, somewhere between around 20 grams per day of this material. I mean, really, how much,
Right.
what kind of glycemic effect, or what kind of cancer feeding effect do you think that's going to have on somebody that's, dealing with active cancer? I mean, to me, you got to use some logic here in what you're thinking about when you're talking about amounts. I mean, we're not talking about eating hundreds of grams of carbohydrate. We're talking about, 10, 20, maybe 30 grams per day of these polysaccharides. It's a whole different animal. It's not like shoveling bananas and apples and peaches and, mangoes down your throat. I hope I don't sound, like I'm being dismissive or, arrogant about this. It's just, gotta think about these things logically when you just kind of, it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. These polysaccharides are not, these are very special compounds. Again, I'm talking about very, very specific sources from aloe vera and rice bran. We're not talking about, again, bananas and apples and pineapples and mangoes. Very, very different here.
Agree. Okay, Dr. Burgess said, great talk. Thanks. What about the effects on A1C and blood sugar and diabetics in particular?
Great question. So I have a lot of people with diabetes taking daily brain care, having great responses to it. We actually, Dr. McDaniel and I, we have this amazing data set of people with diabetes at an Air Force base in Texas. Unfortunately for us, we cannot get access to the data because of, the OD policies and whatnot. But there was a physician there who was running kind of his own. It was more like an internal study. It wasn't an IRB approved study, but he was tracking patients, both military folks and their spouses. And the people who had diabetes that were taking the polysaccharides just had much better glucose control, lowering of HbA1c, lowering of insulin resistance. I mean, just incredible results. Again, I wish I had access to that data set, because I guarantee I could publish a really nice paper out of it. But yes, it's very good for people with anything related to the diabetes.
Okay, Kent Crowley said, great presentation. And
Thank you.
Brad's Stoker said polysaccharides, it's a whole different animal or plant.
Yes, exactly.
And can I
Amen to
ask-
that.
Can I ask which Air Force base you're talking about? Don't get your.
I don't remember which one. I think it's the one in San Antonio.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
If
So
you,
that,
I don't, I'm almost positive it's in San Antonio, but I don't remember the name of the Air Force base.
is
But
the research project still ongoing?
No, this was many years ago, unfortunately.
Okay. Any follow-ups?
No, because the Dr. Purcell, the physician there, he was a contractor. He was not a military guy. And when his contract ended, he stopped working at the base.
Understandable. Okay, are there any other questions that I'm missing? Don't think so.
Well,
Yeah.
I wanna add in one more thing for John.
Awesome. Michelle.
What about for, let's say, autism or for children? Or let's say, with, even, under 2-year-old baby with severe illnesses. Also for COVID, what has been, for long haul COVID, what have you seen anything in that regard?
Thank you for that question, Shell. So yes, Dr.
Sure.
McDaniel has some previous experiences with kids with autism, and also with fetal alcohol syndrome, and has had some really nice responses. That is actually one of the areas where before I left academics full time, we tried to get funding to run a trial in autism. We never could get it, unfortunately for us. But I am in contact with a physician who has a clinic of autistic children, and he's interested in running a trial there. So I'm just waiting on him to get back to me to talk about, using some folks there, getting parental support, parental consent, and getting some children on daily brain care for autism. We think it will be successful. As far as any other thing in kids, I've got several clients currently who have teenagers with ADD, ADHD, just this general attentional problem that so many kids have today. They're definitely getting better. As I like to tell people, our own daughter, we have a 3-year-old. Our daughter, when we started her on solid foods, I would have actually done it her first day of life, but because the powder is a little bit thick, it wouldn't go through her nipple. And so I couldn't get it to her until she was old enough to suck on a nipple that was big enough for the powder to go through. But I started her on this product at 6 months of age. She just turned 3 a couple of months ago. This little girl is the smartest little 3-year-old you'll ever meet in your life. And I'm not saying that because she's my kid, but she truly is a really, really sharp cookie. Her language and comprehension skills are amazing. So I share that anecdote because a lot of times people think, well, it's okay for children, but it's not okay it's okay for adults, but it's not okay for children. I had my wife taking it the whole time she was pregnant. It's fine for pregnant women as well. So there's really no issue there from, in my opinion, cradle to grave in terms of being able to help people. And then finally, with this long haul COVID, brain fog, other cognitive issues, I do have several people that have had very serious COVID complications taking daily brain care and having a resolution in those symptoms as well. So yes, that's another area I'd love if we had funding to do a trial, given how it's so on everyone's mind today, that it would be really fascinating to look at that in a clinical trial. But certainly anecdotally, I'm having good luck with that as well.
I also want to ask about, when people have a stroke or, brain injury, auto accidents, whatever. Have you ever looked into that?
Yes, I have a lady who's she had a stroke several months ago. Her physician is a friend of mine. She told her about daily brain care. She's now been on daily brain care for about a month, and she's having a really nice response to her symptoms and stroke as well. So yes, it's another good area to help people.
How can we get in touch with you, Dr. Lewis, to either get more information or be able to find your products?
Yes, sir. So my website is drlewisnutrition.com, DRLEWIS nutrition.com. I have my email address. If Dr. Clearfield, I can email you the presentation if you want to distribute it to the group. I don't know if you'd like.
Yeah,
And
we
it's got-
so we video it and we put that on our website. If you can send us the slides, we'd like that too.
Fantastic.
And usually on our weekly newsletter, we like to keep the recent speakers, alive, so to speak, and just remind our group, and so just in case they want to get in touch with you,
Okay, great.
we'll do that too. So, okay, how expensive is this? So the powder or whatever
So daily brain care in a powder is $64 a bottle. That's 60 doses.
Mhm.
And the capsules is $40 a bottle. And that's 4 capsules is a dose. So there's 120 capsules in a bottle. So that's 30 doses. But
Mhm.
if anybody's interested in, working together professionally, either as wholesale or affiliate relationship, I'm happy to do that as well. More than happy to talk to anybody about setting up that kind of an agreement for you and your family, your patients, anybody that you'd like to work with on that level. I'm happy to do that as well.
Okay. All right. We'll send that out to our crew. For you.
Fantastic.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else have any comments, questions? Dr. Lewis, I can't thank you enough. Thank you for your time. Great presentation, and you came highly recommended as a speaker beforehand, and I'd have to say that you were undersold. So,
Oh, wow.
so thank you so much. And we're always happy to have somebody of your character and quality, and on our webinar. We're very humbled by your presence. So and we'll stay in touch. We'll want you to come back sometime. Little roads down the road. We're here every Tuesday night. We start at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. We've been doing this for 2.5 years. I have our website there, aosrd.com/webinars. There's a lot of material on there. Like I said, we have over 2.5 years worth of lectures and seminars and you name it. So I think I got that right. drlewisnutrition.com. I hope I got that right.
Yes.
And any wrap up, any summary? Something to let the folks leave the theater with.
Well, first of all, Dr. Clearfield, thank you for all those kind words. That's very humbling. I really appreciate it. And I always try to do my best when I do these kinds of lectures, because people are taking their time out to listen to me, and I always want to be appreciative and respectful of other people's time. So I really put a lot of effort into this. But to me, kind of like what I said earlier, I think there is the opportunity not only to help people with these terrible, tragic health challenges, but also to prevent those kinds of things in the first place. And so prevention to me is just as important as treatment. And I always tell the caregiver or the parent or the grandparent or whatever of, some existing relationship, don't forget about yourself. Like, you need good nutrition too. And these polysaccharides are so special, and you're not getting them from the diet. So as much as we know you cannot supplement your way to a good health outcome, you still have to eat well. But getting these polysaccharides, and again, you don't have to eat 100 grams of them per day. It only takes a few hundred milligrams to a couple of grams, depending on what your condition is. It's just so important to get these every day. So to me, this is, no different than having a meal and brushing my teeth and taking a shower and shaving and all the other things that you do in your life. It's just so important to get these polysaccharides every day. So, right. So, just making these a regular habit is just, to me, like gold. I mean, you can't do much better for your health.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you so much. So, just a couple of little housekeeping things. Next week we have Jay Campbell on. He seems to be the king of peptides. I don't know if you know him at all, Dr.
I
Lewis.
do.
Yeah.
I've been on his show a couple of times, actually.
Yeah, he's quite prolific and
He is,
a bit of a character too. So
yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
we're having some hands-on training. If you want to learn about aesthetics, July 7th to 9th in Reno. You can get me at 570-881-6821 or my email, you all know where to get me, drbill9@gmail.com. We're going to be doing introduction that we'll do Botox fillers, PDO threads, and we're going to do testosterone pellet implants also. So, and it's going to be hands-on training. Everybody is going to get to do it. So, if you're interested in that, please let me know. That's coming up in about a month. And so we need to make plans to see, it's going to be limited to 5, so it's not going to be a big group, but so we want to make sure everybody, if you want to sharpen your skills, please let me know. We are working on, we're going to let you know in the next couple of weeks. I think by the end of the year, we'll be back live, I hope. And we're working on that. And if you remember Dr. Tano, Dr. Tano, Benoit Tano, he's up in Toronto. I think we're going to be working with him about doing a live show, possibly in October or November. And we'll let you know about that. Anybody has any topics they'd like to bring to the table or present, please let me know. Anybody has anything that they'd like to present here, also let me know. We have, as you know, endless Tuesdays to fill up. So, as Dr. Lewis gave us a John at drjohnlewis.com. That's a contact there, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right. I'll have the video up as soon as I can. Usually we get it up within 24 hours, 48 at tops. If you want a copy of this, Dr. Lewis, you're more than welcome to have it. I'll send it to you when it's ready.
Great.
Thank again, we can't thank you enough. Send a friend. Okay. And all you out there in TV land, I always tell you every week, bring one friend, we'll double our census. So
Right.
okay. And so we'll be back next week, same time, same station. You got the last word, sir.
Just thank you again for all your kind words, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you guys.
Thank you for your time and your effort and your expertise. It's really amazing what we actually can bring to the table when we put our mind to it. So,
Thank you.
okay, thank you. Okay, anybody else? John, you got anything before we go?
Thanks for a great talk. Appreciate it.
How's the medical
Thank you.
school going, by the way?
Everything's totally positive. I will mention, since you brought it up, one of the things the new medical school wants to do is instill research in their students. So we have several plans and several projects going on now. And I was hoping at some point to ask Dr. Lewis if he would help share with us information, advice on research. You brought up IRB, a few things like that. We're trying to do it right. The medical school wants to do it right. The students need the training. So if you would help us with that situation, we would love to have your advice.
Oh, it'd be my pleasure to help you guys.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. All right, John, thanks. Everything went okay last week. I know, I'm sorry I cut you off right at the end because you were using my cell phone as the internet last week. So
Everything's
I
wonderful.
was with the grandkids and it was like almost 11 o'clock where I was and it's still on. So I just shut it off and apparently you guys were still going. So
We're good.
okay. All right. Great. Everybody. Thank you. New folks. Great to see you again. Thank you. And our old friends. Good to see you. If anybody had trouble getting in, please let me know. Contact me and let me know because every once in a while we have a little glitch in the system. So if that happens, let me know. Okay. Dr. Lewis, again, thank you so much. And I'm going to say goodnight to everybody. And we'll see you again next week. Same time, same station.
Thanks for showing up.
Thank you.
Okay.
Better late than never.
Steve, do you have anything? You have anything about your prostate project, by the way, before we go?
Yeah, I need information. Send me your results I'll put it
Okay.
in.
Right.
Okay, we'll do.
It's not just prostate. I think it's, what type of cancers was it, Stefan?
All types of cancers.
I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, the offer for the dance lesson for the wedding dances still stands, by the way. Let me know. Okay.
Okay, good. Are you gonna come to Halasi's thing this weekend?
No, you know what? It was just too much traveling for me.
Yeah,
so,
it is.
So, but they did ask me to come and speak, but it was just, I think they told me a half hour. It's too, it was just too much for a half hour. So, but take notes, okay?
Yeah, I will. I'll try to hit it up this weekend.
Okay. All right, everybody. Good night, and we'll see you
Thank you.
again next week. Thank
We're
you.
out.
We're out.